Hi, I'm Regan Robinson, your host of Future Fit, the only podcast unraveling the secrets of how the world's most innovative leaders stay future ready in a fast-paced world. I've spent over 20 years as a futurist and strategist, transforming top global brands and putting investment-backed startups on paths to sustainable growth. Along the way, I've become obsessed with new ways to prepare for the future, because thinking about the long term once a year simply isn't enough. In each episode, I talk with movers, shakers, and path breakers who share their stories about how they turn uncertainty into their strategic advantage. Throughout our journey, we'll discover unconventional and imaginative ways to help you thrive today while leading your teams into tomorrow. Future Fit leaders know that being prepared for what's next is more than a business decision. It's a way of being. Let's venture together as we co-create a new future readiness playbook. The future can't wait, and neither can I. So, are you ready to get future fit? So today I'm thrilled to welcome Dan Slagen, a four-time startup executive with experience in leading and scaling disruptive global functions across various industries, both public and private. Dan is renowned for his expertise in building teams and industry-leading global go-to-market strategies and is the chief marketing officer at tomorrow.io, the world's leading weather intelligence and climate adaptation platform. Global leaders, including JetBlue, Fox Sports, and Uber, rely on tomorrow.io's next-generation space technology, cutting-edge generative AI, and proprietary modeling capabilities to solve their weather and climate-related challenges. And tomorrow.io recently raised $87 million in Series E funding in 2023. Dan was recently named to 2024 Forbes Entrepreneurial CMO 50 list and has been featured in the New York Times, Bloomberg, Fortune, and many, many more. Dan is also a frequent speaker and advisor on innovative brands and is the author of the best-selling book, Understanding Startup CEOs, which provides insights on how to work effectively with CEOs of industry-leading companies. Dan is someone who is taking risks and pushing the limits of what's possible. And so I am incredibly excited to hear what he has to share with us today. So welcome to the show, Dan.
Appreciate that introduction and thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here.
So excited for our conversation today. So let's get this party started with the question I pose to all of my guests, which is, what does future ready mean to you?
I think for me, just given what we've gone through in the last few years here at Tomorrow.io, being future ready to me means if everything you knew about the world and your business suddenly changed, how quickly could you adapt and be up and running without having major disruptions? Example just being a few years ago, we thought we had the exact business plan and go-to-market strategy needed to grow the company, and then COVID happened. And how quickly after COVID happened were we able to get back on track and back on the trajectory that we needed to go? And to me, that is the example of being a future-ready company, is not just being able to predict the future, but also being able to adapt to the future based on the unexpected happening.
Yeah, I think that the adaptability portion of it is so important. And that's why my take is it's actually future readiness is a way of being. It's a mindset. It is a capability as well, but it's a capacity. And when you cultivate that capacity, that's when that adaptability becomes more organic and actually more effortless, which is something I think people don't really realize, is this can actually be a bit more effortless. It doesn't have to be quite so painful.
Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of future readiness being a way of being, my view is it's not a one and done or annual activity, but it's actually something that you can exercise and train. And in your book, you advocate for taking care of yourself, staying in shape, and managing your energy. And I advocate for this as well, because when it comes to future readiness, you actually have to create the conditions for this way of seeing and sensing the future's possibilities and connecting the dots. And so what are some ways that you get your mind ready for future-oriented, exploratory, and imaginative thinking?
I think one thing I'd say is I was definitely born with a very wild and wide imagination, just as someone in general. I'm constantly thinking about things in a different way, sometimes having too much of a contrarian mindset, to be honest, probably at the reverse
I can
effect
relate
of
to
my,
that.
yeah, probably the reverse effect of my friends and family.
Me
But
too,
really,
black sheep.
yeah.
Woo!
But it's funny. Sometimes things that don't always serve you well in your personal life can serve you very well in your professional life and vice versa. And even same with being very imaginative and being very creative. It's especially in marketing, it's something that doesn't necessarily or didn't serve me very well in the academic years of my life. But I feel like it's something that set me apart so quickly when I got into the marketing world, and being able to help the team understand how you're thinking and why you're thinking that way, and when is really important. I know that I'm not going to be able to perfectly convey to my team how to think and get on my same level in terms of imagination, but just constantly sharing stories, not being embarrassed, not being scared to tell them how I'm thinking about things, really, I think, unlocks a sense of confidence for them to come back with ideas that they might think are silly or they might think are a little bit strange.
So it sounds like there's a level of transparency and vulnerability that goes into how you even get yourself into sort of the zone of being imaginative. It's like I don't know, a self-perpetuating motion, if you will.
Definitely. And I constantly have tomorrow.io on my mind. Of course, I try and take breaks professionally, but I've come up, just, I know people have said it in the past, but it's true. I've come up with some of my best ideas in the shower, going for a run, driving in the car, whatever I might be doing. And I just see something. And I'm just thinking about the business in the back of my head, and something clicks, and I'll just write that down real quick. But I get so many of those ideas in addition to the more standard way of having a team brainstorm or something like that.
Yeah, you know why that is because through cognitive science and neuroscience, that your nervous system actually has to be in a rest and digest state in order for imagination to work in your brain. They've studied this. And so that's the reason you can nerd out on this all day.
I like it.
Yeah, that is actually the reason why we have ahas in the shower. And so one of the things that I'm very intentional about, I actually call them rest and digests, where I get out of the city for a couple of days. I'm still working in my brain, but I'm reading books. I'm by the ocean. I have my toes in the sand. I'm in the sun, like whatever it is. And I find that when I take that time to be intentional and switch my nervous system from fight or flight to rest and digest, that's where that dot connecting starts to happen.
Nice. Love it.
Yeah. So you recently told Forbes that you market with the conviction, I love this, that I'm going to paraphrase you here, that following a standard marketing playbook nets expected results. And by taking risks, the goal is to push the limits of what's considered industry standard or even best in class. Now, risk-taking and future readiness go hand in hand, and risk-taking really shakes up the norm and reveals new perspectives and opportunities. So I always liken it to turning a kaleidoscope, and enables you to see different patterns. And really, this dynamic process is essential for companies to stay relevant and ready for future challenges. So how do you determine what risks are worth taking in your role as Chief Marketing Officer? And how do these decisions align with or even support Tomorrow.io's long-term marketing strategy?
Yeah, I think one thing when I joined the company, it was very understood between my CEO and I that we were going to have to take risks. We were competing with some incredibly large companies with an endless amount of budget, 20, 30, 40 years head start, and just a lot of behavioral changes that need to happen. So if we were going to go about doing marketing in the traditional way, or even trying to play like they play, we knew we were going to lose. I love to use the movie Moneyball as the example. Right? If we try and act like the Yankees, we are going to lose, no question about it.
Right.
So first and foremost, I was very privileged professionally to have a boss and a CEO from the top down that was in agreement and alignment that we did need to take risks more often than not. Mm-hmm. That said, of course, we have to protect the company, and we have to protect the brand, and we have to protect the employees and investors. So the way that we like to do it is constantly be running signal tests. And when we run a signal test, there's a number of things that you can learn. It's not just, did this work or did it not? What part of the test worked? Did we see this part work? What can we learn? Why did that part work? Could we apply that to future campaigns? Okay, this part didn't work. What did we learn from that? Why should we not apply that to future campaigns? And just consistently be running them. So that's one thing that's helped quite a bit. The other thing that we like to do a lot is set up our systems to adapt very, very quickly to whatever the future holds. So an example might be, let's say that you're a company that's very dependent on ChatGPT or Google Gemini or any of the LLMs right now. And then there's a big conference yesterday that happens. And everyone's waiting to hear, what are they going to announce?
Yeah.
You can basically have your entire go-to-market campaign ready to go. And the only thing you need to plug in is the word, theme, or phrase that the announcement focused on, and then just launch 5 minutes after it's done. And it's going to look like you knew what they were talking about and it's magic and how did they do it? And really, you just built 99% of the campaign before that. You just needed to change one or two things to tweak it to perfectly align with what was said. And so that's the kinds of things that we do. For us, we send satellites up to space and they're starting to send data down. We built our systems well before those satellites were up. So we knew the second they were up in space and on, our systems would just start working seamlessly. So we also prepare for the future so that as soon as it happens, it's happening in real time.
Right. So it sounds like risk taking and future preparedness is really baked into the DNA of your company. Now, you said your signals test. Is that just a nomenclature for like a catch-all for all of the types of tests that you're doing? I'm just curious to hear about that. Okay.
The easiest way to describe it would be something like, let's say we're running an email test here at the company and we have a very, very large database. Instead of sending out an email to everyone, we might take 4 or 5 email subject lines and send them out to a very small number of people to see which signal is driving the most amount of interest or engagement. Then if we have a winner from that, we'll say, great, let's send that to the entire base, as opposed to just guessing, hey, we think this is going to work. That's just one very simple example, but it's to highlight how we think about one signal test we'd apply to other areas of the company and even marketing. We use it in our go-to-market, through product launches, everything.
Well, there's power in simplicity. And why that triggered me is because a lot of the work that I do is around signals and how to be ready and open to spotting them. And for example, outliers and anomalies are a lot of things that I actually encourage people look. Those are actually really important data points to be focusing on rather than data telling you stuff that you already know. What are you learning that actually catches you by surprise? I actually have a shorthand for it. I'm dating myself here, but the 1990s CNC Music Factory song, the things that make you go, if you start to feel that, I even dance a little, then that might be a data point or a signal to your point that is actually worth exploring and could unlock a new innovation or a new message or a new marketing solution.
But it's really hard, I think, to that point to know when to take something you're hearing and turn it into action. It's actually a really, really hard habit to develop. Yeah. I'm still not perfect at it. And we recently went through a brand update as we've started with weather intelligence and we evolved to climate adaptation and early warning systems. And now that's all culminated through resilience and our resilience platform right now. And the way that came about was a number of different signals coming to us and then us finally waking up one day and saying, how many more data points do we need? Clearly, we need to move into this space. This is where the brand and the product needs to evolve. But it's exactly right.
Well, for me, I think this is where it comes back to well-being, creating psychologically safe spaces, because it's my belief that everything is actually right in front of us. And actually nothing should really surprise us if we're looking. And when you start to be more intentional about how you look at these signals, these outliers and anomalies, you start looking for patterns, you look to history to patterns. There's a lot of really interesting ways that you can start to weave together the inputs that you're getting. But I do agree it's hard. And that's why also I'm a big proponent of intuition, right? Mm-hmm. What is your intuition telling you? Like, how can you marry what the data is telling you plus what just gut instinct? There's a lot of research around the power of intuition, especially when it comes to anticipating the future's possibilities or where things could be headed from a market standpoint.
And I think to that point, not only that, but how do you get in touch with your intuition now, given there's so many distractions in the world and so many different things telling you what to think and how to feel and all that kind of stuff. And I remember, I forget exactly which investor it was, but it was one of the most successful investors during the COVID stretch, said that what they did as soon as COVID happened was they took their team and they just disconnected them from the world. They just said, COVID's going to happen. This is what's likely going to happen. How's it going to impact the world? Get offline. Let's just go to a think room for a couple days and just write down all the things that we think would happen. And turning the team off, I think, from outside perspective and influence and internet and all that kind of stuff was the thing that probably allowed them to get in touch with that tuition that you just talked about. And we try to some extent to do the same thing here when we're thinking about what's the next evolution of the company or the brand or our next go-to-market campaign or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why. So my approach to strategic foresight, so what I do as a futurist is actually rooted in well-being, no surprise there, imagination and intuition, because I believe that those three components are part of the secret sauce. But you have to be taking care of yourself. Well-being can mean lots of things. It's mental health, it's financial well-being. It's not just feeling good, right? But what I've learned over the years is when you get to this place where that is the foundation, and it's a strong, really, truly, genuinely strong foundation. The way that I'm able to operate and move through the world is actually quite different than a lot of people. But I think it enables you to start to see and sense. It's like this, I call it it's a hyper awareness, right? That allows you to connect the dots. So I'd love to shift gears to talk about innovation. Now, innovation means different things to different people, and it has certainly become a buzzword that has jumped the shark, right? Now, but one of my favorite recent articulations of what innovation is that it's purposely vague, purposely reaching, and purposely trying to think about problems and challenges in new ways. I thought that was so great. Now, tomorrow, I believe it is, you'll be speaking on a panel at the Boston Globe Tech Week 2024 entitled, Do We Need a New Innovation Playbook? And you've said in the past, and I couldn't agree more, that innovation is a powerful competitive advantage in every way. And so I'm curious, what does innovation mean to you, and how are you approaching it as a driver of competitive advantages in your role and within your company?
I think for us here, innovation is just not getting comfortable. And it's very easy to get comfortable. I was having a conversation yesterday with someone on my team, and we were starting to look at how many leads come into the company and all that kind of stuff. And we've been fortunate enough to build a very predictable system here on our go-to-market. And if you look at our lead generation for the year, it's a comforting chart, to be honest with you. It's a very comforting chart that a lot of go-to-market teams would want to have. And we were talking about that in the sense that can also work against you, because you look at it every week, and as long as you see the chart looks similar to last week, you should feel comfortable. Yeah, exactly. Versus, well, if you zoom out a little bit and think about, well, where do we want the business to be 18 months from now? And how far away are we from that goal? And why don't we start measuring those expectations against our current expectations, and let's see how behind the ball we are. And when you start to do that, very comforting chart makes you very uncomfortable very, very quickly, because you don't know today how you're going to 2x, 5x, 10x what your current, lead generation is. And so just having that mindset across every part of the business, or just future thinking in general, is trying to think about the bigger picture, not getting too comfortable or too complacent, to your point, but what's happening today or what you did yesterday. Always have time for celebrations, but where do you really expect to be, or where could you push yourself to be a quarter from now, 2 quarters, 2 years, 5 years from now, and just making sure you're constantly thinking bigger and just paying attention to that as well. Because I think, again, you can go through weeks, months, if not quarters of just sitting in that very comfortable place and thinking that that's enough.
I think that's really insightful too, that you actually have something that you're looking at that at first blush, right, makes you feel comfortable. But it's actually, if we're not actually really trying to get underneath what's happening, or to your point, looking at a much longer view, this could actually lead us astray. And so what comes up for me is confirmation bias, right? What are we looking at that is actually confirming what we already know? And then we fall into this comfort cycle. And so that's why I always advocate for it. Like, you gotta assumption bust, and you gotta confirmation bias bust, and do it on a continual basis, because that can, if you're not doing that, if you're not asking the hard questions, if you're not bumping up against the other, as I like to say, seeking diverse perspectives, mixing it up, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, like and then suddenly it's, oh my gosh, we've been operating with the wrong hypothesis here, essentially, even though we had something written out that said this is like, everything was copacetic. Like nobody can rest on their laurels. If you know somebody in the world that can, I'd like maybe King Charles, but not even he can, right? Actually.
And I feel like it's not always fair to your company, your team, to surprise them with that. Oh, we've been operating like this, and surprise, it's been wrong. We do this. And so we also like to do, and what I try and do, is bring the team along for the ride and really make sure on a consistent basis we're talking about short, medium, long-term goals. The hard
Mm-hmm.
part of that is, of course, you want your team for the most part working on kind of the week to week, the month to month, the quarter to quarter thinking, because you don't want them to spend too much time in that dreamer state. But at the same time, if you don't let them do it, then to your point, you're just going to run these surprise tests, as opposed to I get them to start thinking about where we'd like to see the business 12 to 18 months from now, so they understand why we're putting systems in place, or they can start to think how I'm thinking as well. And then it's just about trying to find that balance between shifting gears of short term, medium term, and long term.
Yeah. Well, I think what people don't realize, and there's a lot of science that backs all this up, is the sooner you expose yourself to the information, even if it's not complete information, it's actually much better for people in terms of change and adaptation and building resiliency. And also just, again, exposing yourself to potential what if scenarios, what if futures, even if they're not the right one, because a lot of times this stuff doesn't come to pass, right? It's like the whole point, but you are actually training your brain to get better at dealing with information that it's not comfortable with. And so, I mean, I joke, there's no secret why this show is called Future Fit, but maybe I need to explain to people, because I believe that this is actually a fit, just like exercising, right? There is a future readiness fitness that we all can cultivate. And some of it's physical, some of it's emotional, some of it's mental, some of it's psychological. But when you have all these sort of systems operating in the best capacity, like I've honed over many, many years of a lot of work, right? It's just, then it becomes a bit more effortless. And it's just, again, how you move throughout the world. So I think that's a good segue into my next question. And you mentioned your resilience platform. And I was laughing because when I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to get so meta. So your resilience platform empowers companies to implement systems for operational resilience against both everyday disruptions and extreme events. I'm like getting chills because I'm like, this is what I do. Okay. And you posted that preparedness for the unexpected has never been more critical or costly, and how for you, this year is all about embracing the unexpected. And in our earlier chat, we talked about some of the parallels between our work, because future readiness is all about preparing for the future. And so I'd love to just take it a step further, because I'm very curious. Tell me a bit more about how you're approaching preparing for the unexpected and building operational resilience within the company, and maybe what hurdles or revelations you have encountered along the way.
I'm in my 5th year at this company, and I don't recall a 5-year stretch, at least within the tech and startup world, where every single year some major crisis happened. And I think COVID happened 2 months after I joined this company. And every single year since then, there has been some major thing that has thrown the economy off track, thrown the startup and tech world off track, the investment off track. There's been something major. I just don't remember a 5-year time that was so volatile, at least in my career here. And so we've become very, very comfortable with being uncomfortable, and really starting to say, all right, before we know things, or if we have anything unexpected that comes up, how can we make sure that, one, we're both safeguarded for risk, but also we're very ready to take advantage and really capitalize on that momentum. And so those are things that we've talked about here every single year. And we try not to put too many of our eggs in one basket or overinvest too early in the year. We try and really balance that line between patience and being aggressive. And it's hard. It's very hard to know how to balance it, but just constantly thinking about it and trying to understand from a strategic standpoint, should we go faster? Should we slow down? Should we invest here? Should we not? I just think it's a conversation that we've gotten very comfortable having, and it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but we're not afraid to have it, and we have it pretty often. And I think it's one thing that really helps us keep our course and constantly ask if the course we're on is the right one.
Well, that's what I was going to ask is it like every day? Like how intentional are you being with it? Like just so the leaders who are listening have some more tangible advice for, okay, no, how do I really start doing this?
Especially since things went remote or hybrid or sometimes in office and things like that. I mean, we have as many of our teams do daily stand-ups as possible, including the exec team. And even if it's just for a couple minutes just to check in, or to have certain days of the week where there's a theme, whether it's revenue growth or culture or something like that. And then obviously we have longer term meetings in terms of monthly and quarterly get-togethers and those types of things. But really just being to your point, intentional about having those conversations and what the actual topic and theme and what the output of the meeting needs to be.
Well, I think that gets lost to your point about remote work and, everybody has a lot going on, but communication and being intentional about it actually does make a difference, right? It's hard, and that's why people turn away from it, right? But again, do one thing every day that scares you, and that could be having uncomfortable conversations every single day. Again, the more you practice it, the easier it gets. And I sense or wonder too, might be happening within your culture. It's because it is so front and center. It's so out in the open that when disagreements come up or when people are like obviously uncomfortable, there's this trust built. There's the psychological safety that is built that makes the risk taking that you guys do and having the conversation that you have just flow a bit more nicely. That doesn't mean people don't get tripped up. They will, but then everybody can, to your earliest point about how quickly can we keep moving, right? When you have these things in place, it actually does make a difference.
Yeah. And I think, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this, but I do think cultural risk is a big one to any leader listening or anyone out there. For us, you said it earlier in the show. I know that's an individual honor, but it's really something I think about as a marketing team. So I like to say that our marketing team was selected as a Forbes top 50. And I was in New York a couple weeks ago at the gala that Forbes put on for us. And we're up on stage with CMOs of Visa and GE and some of the largest brands in the world. And we're a 4-person marketing team with a 6-figure budget. And there's no way that our team gets there if we were doing things in a traditional sense. And I think culture is a big, big part of that. I've been very open and honest with the team that I don't particularly care where they work or when they work or how they work. We have goals. I need them to think a certain way. I need them to perform a certain way. And I need them, to your point, to be able to allow themselves to operate like that. And so do what you need to do in your personal life or your life outside of work to be able to come in and operate at the absolute best level that you possibly can. And I know that everyone on the marketing team in the last 12 months leading up to that award has just been absolutely performing at arguably the best output of their entire career. And so it's just one thing I would say, there's no way we would have won that if we were operating as a normal team and thinking like a normal company would.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. And I was beyond impressed by what you've accomplished with your team size and with your budget. And it just goes to show that throwing out the playbook and the old way of doing things is okay. That doesn't mean you have to throw every single thing out and start with a blank piece of paper, although there is, especially when you're dealing with legacy systems, there is a benefit to that. But you have proven you have a business case for how doing more with less and thinking differently and taking risks and having uncomfortable conversations, all these things that you're talking about in the culture that you've cultivated has made a huge difference. And then lo and behold, you're recognized on stage with Lynn Teo. Shout out to Lynn, who was a previous guest, who's the CMO of Northwestern Mutual. Different size teams, different budgets. Like, wow. Let's just take a moment to let that sink in. It's a big deal.
And I think that's what I was so happy about for the team is that, because as I mentioned, joining this company, it was very clear from day one, it was going to be a much different challenge than what I've done in the past. I've had the 100-ish person teams and the $50 million a year budgets, and that presents its own opportunity and its own challenges. But then when you get shrunk down to a smaller team and smaller budgets, there's this notion that you can't compete at the same level and that you don't get taken as seriously. And you can see it across the team from time to time, and just instilling that sense that you guys belong here. We can do it. We just need to think the right way and make the right moves. And then to be able to actually have that happen. Again, it was a tremendous honor for me, but I was really more just so happy for the team to get that type of acceptance. Yeah,
I think that's incredible. So speaking of marketing, you posted that the hardest part about it in 2024 will be knowing when to stick with your plan and when to peel off. I love that. And chase a new opportunity for a short, medium, or long amount of time. And that really resonated with me because it highlights this delicate balance between discipline and agility that modern marketers must master. And in a world where market dynamics can shift overnight, which is what we've been talking about, Having the insight to stay the course or pivot swiftly is just mission critical. It's about being strategic yet flexible and having the foresight to recognize when a calculated risk could lead to big rewards. And so I'm curious, what gaps or difficulties are you facing when crafting long-term strategies that are essential for building Tomorrow.io's future trajectory and brand? And what wisdom or advice would you offer for leaders who are struggling with similar challenges?
It's an excellent question, and I have failed at it quite a bit. I think what's helping me the most right now is being exceptionally well connected with my boss. I'm fortunate enough here for that person to be the CEO of the company and really understanding from their perspective, where are we short, medium, and long-term stage of the company? And then making sure that he knows that we have marketing campaigns and go-to-market campaigns that are aligning with each of those objectives. We have short-term goals. Here they are. Great. This is what we're doing. Medium and long-term. I do it for two reasons. One, if I'm not proactively showing where the strategy is going to go, then I'm probably going to get told what the strategy is and just go be an execution monkey, which is less fun. But then two, it also gives him and the company the confidence that the marketing team is able to think more strategically. And we want to be thinking more strategically so that we can start to build the systems that we're going to need 18 months, 24 months from now, but while also not losing fact of the notion that we need to perform this week. It's a very delicate balance because in order to, usually you don't get pulled into longer term discussions unless you're nailing it on the short term. And there's plenty of confidence that short term is fine. And so it's taken us, again, I said, I'm in my fifth year here. And so there's been a lot of trust building that's happened over the course of the last 5 years where I think we've been able to get that seat at the table. And it's one thing I wish every CMO reported to the CEO, and I wish every CMO was in the board meetings because we deserve to be there and the marketing organization deserves to be there. So I think we're incredibly, we benefit a lot as a team there, but we've also taken a lot of time to build up that trust.
Yeah, the trust is everything, as we know. And what's coming up for me is the notion of a ambidextrous mindset, right? It's like the ability to seamlessly toggle between strategic and tactical. I was telling you earlier, like, strategy, but I'm also ops. And people look at me like I'm a 10-headed monster sometimes. And I'm like, well, no, that's how you are really nimble. That's how you're able to zoom in and zoom out. I have no qualms about rolling up my sleeves and getting into the details, because sometimes you need to do that in order to see what's going on, or you learn new things that then, then how, that's what I call strategy. I do strategy cascades, right? You're constantly cascading up and down and going around, right? And I think that's really insightful. And then to your point about just constant communication, that to me is a big takeaway from our conversation today, and building transparent, honest, humble relationships. I think it's marvelous how you're really cultivating and nurturing your team. I think it's highly unusual, especially for a VC-backed startup where there's a lot of stuff whirling around. And so I think that's remarkable. And then the last thing that's coming up for me is just throw out the playbook, create a new playbook. We don't have to follow what other people are doing. And I think people forget that. But it's okay, if it worked for them over here, well, guess what? Today is so complex that the chances that you can get insights from it, and there are components, but if you think that you're just going to have a checklist, and you're going to be able to follow that checklist and have the same results, good luck.
It's funny. Whenever I interview people, I think I throw them for a loop at how little I care about what they did at their last company and whether the company perfectly matches us or they're bigger or smaller. Because I know what I did at previous companies is not going to work at this company. What I've done at last companies, I'm not doing here, and vice versa. So I don't care what you did in the past as much as I care about what can you do today, what can you do tomorrow. But yeah, the last thing I'll say is I just think being able to speed up, slow down, zoom in, zoom out, be creative, be analytical, and being able to do that without having too much debt is one of the things that has also just helped us the most in terms of being able to be there in the future for when it happens as well. So just leaving yourself room to grow.
Love that. I think those are wise words to bring us to a close. But a final question before you share where listeners can find you. Now, in your view, is preparing for the future more about managing risks or capitalizing on opportunities?
A good question. I think I would say capitalizing on opportunities because I think every risk does present an opportunity if it's viewed in the right way.
Yeah, great. And with that, where can people go to find out more about you and your work?
Thank you. Best place is LinkedIn.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and your brilliant insights, Dan. It's been enlightening. You've definitely got my brain churning, and I have had so much fun exploring with you today.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Future Fit. If you're listening, you're probably future curious. So follow me in my newsletter on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going and share your discoveries with the Future Fit community. And if you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe, rate, and review Future Fit on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time.